It was 1992 and my video game shop was robbed at a time when it was just taking off. I didn't know what to do, and with no insurance, all seemed doomed. For me, 1992 was a bit slow for movies, but we still had some great ones. Reservoir Dogs, The Lawnmower Man, Encino Man with Radmobile, Alien 3, Malcolm X, and Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman. However, when I think of 1992, I think of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I don't ever wanna feel like I did that day. We had two jumping songs. Jump around, jump around. Yep, 1992 gave some great classics. But what about this?
Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt.
Baby got ballet feet with the open booty.
That's right, in 1992 that song was played over the radio all the time. But my two favourites are 2 Unlimited and Utah Saints. So it was around mid-April 1992 and my grandfather and I were standing in an empty shop that we're currently paying rent for, wondering what we're going to do. We had no insurance, none, zero, zip. My grandfather didn't believe in insurance, and unfortunately we had no measures for a security system or bars on the windows or anything like that. So let's talk facts and figures. Back in 1991 I borrowed $21,000 off my grandfather to start up Australian Vision Games, the shop. That included stock and 3 months rent in advance. The current stock that was stolen was worth approximately $28,000. That's right, it was worth more because I actually injected money back into the business so it would grow. And in the 7 months I was open, I paid back $10,000 to my grandfather. So only owing him $11,000 and having the $27,000 stock, I was doing pretty well. Keep in mind, I didn't take much of a salary at the time. My grandfather, who was a scrap metal merchant and doing okay for himself, offered to lend me $20,000 yet again. That would mean I owe him $30,000. He wanted to waiver the $20,000 that he's going to lend me just because he talked me out of insurance, but no, I wanted to do it on my own. I knew I could make this shop whole again, but it's something I had to think about. So we ordered approximately $20,000 worth of stock. We had Super Famicom, Sega Mega Drive, and of course the PC Engine, and heaps of games to go with it. But there was something very different after the robbery. Customers weren't coming in like they used to. I didn't know what to do. I actually started getting scared. And I noticed my competitors, High Tech Game Center, were doing amazing. So one day I got bored. I hardly had any customers and I decided to call up Leisure and Allied Industries. They are the distributors for Capcom arcade machines. And I wanted to order a game I've always wanted, and that is Forgotten Worlds with the custom spinning controls. Unfortunately, they haven't seen the Forgotten Worlds for years. Keep in mind, I was only out 4 years at the time. So I decided to call Capcom Japan to see if they would be able to help. I mean, what have I got to lose? I remember being so nervous the first time I called that when they answered the phone, I quickly hung up. I was like, I didn't know what to say. And then I tried again and said, could I speak to someone who speaks English, please? They put me through to an international inquiry department. I spoke to a British man, which was really weird to hear, calling a Japanese company. He asked me what was my inquiry. I said, I'm after a Forgotten Worlds arcade board. He put me through to sales and there was a man who spoke English there. I started talking to this man and before you know it, I was talking to him for 2 hours about all things Capcom. Old, new, up and coming, it was incredible. When I told him I had Capcom number plates and my own video game shop, the guy absolutely loved me. He asked me my favourite Capcom game. I said Forgotten Worlds, the one I'm after. He said, leave it with me, I'll see what I can do. He said, would you mind talking to someone for me? I thought, talking to someone? Me? You know, little old me talking to someone at Capcom? Yeah, who is it? He said, I'll let him explain it. He must have transferred me. Then all of a sudden I hear this man on the phone with very poor English trying to speak to me. He eventually got a translator, and it was a man known as Akira Nishitani. And I'm thinking, do I know that name? Should I know that name? The translator said, come on, you're a Capcom expert, you should know who this is. And I just couldn't guess. Then all of a sudden he said he's also known as Nin. I went white. Is this the same person who made Final Fight, Forgotten Worlds and Street Fighter? Yes, it was. I literally thought I was dreaming. Within a couple of weeks, I ended up ringing them 3 times to ask them all sorts of questions. And for some reason, they loved it. They loved hearing about how much I absolutely loved Capcom, that I had Capcom number plates, that I knew the soundtracks off by heart, that I knew so much about Capcom because Capcom was life for me. I also told them I broke my wrist on Street Fighter 1. They laughed. And within a week, I got this. Brand new punch pads for the Street Fighter 1 arcade machine. Unfortunately, they couldn't locate a Street Fighter 1 machine at the time, but hey, at least I've got these. I've actually got 2 pair so I can make the cabinet one day. They sent me a brochure, and a week later, they sent me Capcom Arcade History VHS tape. I couldn't believe it. I was in with Capcom. But there was still one very real problem. My shop was going down. I had hardly any customers, and they were all going to High Tech Game Center. I couldn't compete on price, and I just didn't have anything to pull customers in. So I had to come up with a plan. And now having a new contact at Capcom and Street Fighter getting released on the Super Famicom within the next 6 weeks, I wondered if my contact could help me. So I rang up my contact at Capcom and asked him if he could supply me a copy of Street Fighter 2 just before it comes out in Japan. He said, let me see what I can do. He calls back at the end of the day. He said, Joel, how many copies do you need? I asked him if I could have 100 copies if possible. He said, leave it with him. He'll know in 24 hours, and I could possibly have the copies at the same time they get released in Japan, meaning they would send it a few days earlier and it'd get here right on the same day. That means I'd be in front of my competitors, and that's what I needed. My contact rings me up at the end of the week and said we can spare you 200 copies and we will send them 1 week before its release date in Japan, which was the 10th of June. So I decided to put an ad in the local paper of Rue doing a fireball, and I put Street Fighter 2 on the Super Famicom for $210. Now I was buying the games for approximately $145 landed. Keep in mind they had to buy a Honeybee converter if they didn't already have one, or they would at least need a Super Famicom to play the cartridge. I got them on the 8th of June, 200 copies of them. This is the very first copy I got. I kept it for myself, obviously, and this is it. The one I'm holding here came to me on the 8th of June, and I started selling them straight away. And all of a sudden, I was the best video game shop in Australia. I was so good that I had companies, even High Tech Game Center themselves, buying quantities off me. The problem was, those 200 copies went within 10 days. In the meantime, the other shops, my competitors, didn't have their copy of Street Fighter 2 because it was so popular and sold out in Japan that the Hong Kong companies were almost a month behind. So I came up with another idea, Simon Lee. I got Simon to ring up the Hong Kong companies, the 3 main ones, and basically what I wanted them to do is sell me the Street Fighter 2 exclusively. That means my competitors wouldn't be able to buy it from them. They agreed. And can you believe those 500 copies went within 6 weeks? This is a little shop in West Preston, really an unknown suburb compared to the rest of Australia. And I had people buying from New Zealand, from Queensland, from all over Australia, and my competitors started buying quantities off me. And at this stage, I was making at least $60 per game in profit. And with the Honeybee converters, I was making at least $28 profit per Honeybee converter. So in this 6-week period, I sold 700 copies of Street Fighter at no discount for $210. That's a total of $147,000, and the approximate profit on those Street Fighter cartridges was around $31,000 to $32,000. Then there's the honeybee converters. For that 6 weeks period, we sold at least 500 honeybee converters, and that's $14,000 profit. I was living the dream. And that's right, I was able to pay my grandfather back in full and continue on with my business and watch it grow. Now, we're only talking about one game here, Street Fighter 2. We're not talking about all the consoles I sold. I sold so many Super Famicoms because of this game. Because instead of buying a honeybee converter, people just bought a Super Famicom so they could play the latest Japanese games and not wait for them to come out here. And the best part is, all the people going to High Tech and other rival shops would start to come back to me. I had customers lined out the door, and I'm not kidding. The shop was completely packed with a line of at least 10 or 20 people waiting to pick up their Street Fighter 2 or waiting to pick up the latest game. Things were going spectacular. I was bringing in Mega CDs, and I would have sold hundreds of them. There would be hundreds of Mega CD Japanese versions in Australia because of my shop. In total for that year, I sold 980 copies of Street Fighter 2. So if you've got a Japanese copy of Street Fighter 2 in your collection and you live in Australia, there's a good chance it came from my shop. I didn't have the monopoly long because the companies I was dealing with in Hong Kong, eventually after a couple of months, allowed their copies to be sold to High Tech and other competitors. But at least I had that big boost that gave my shop the big advantage. For the next 6 months, right up until Christmas, my shop was doing fantastic. Everything was going great. Everything was going so great, I even proposed to my girlfriend. And it was so busy at the shop, Kylie started working there with me. Yep, I have to say, things were unbelievable. I was making tons of money, and I was ordering every single game I could that could be bought and secretly stashing them away so one day I could have a massive collection. Now, $210 may have seemed a lot of money for a Street Fighter 2 game, but you have to understand this game was sold out everywhere for months. On top of that, the Australian exchange rate was shocking. Also, High Tech Game Center was selling their Street Fighters for $235, and their honeybee converters were $10 more expensive than mine. Yep, they were some amazing times. Nothing could stop me until I heard a knock at the door. It's Nintendo.